So today's going to be more of a can do than a how to. So we'll just see what's available and what's not. And as always, I'm working with Sun Cloud 6.4 in the cloud environment, but Sun 6 and Sun 4 on-premise do have much of the same look and feel, just might not have all of the same functions and access things. So we're going to kick off really quickly. We're not going to get too deep into the actual forms themselves, but this is your asset record. You put your asset details on. It has all your details, what account you want the depreciation to go to in your balance sheet, what account you want the depreciation to go to in your profit and loss. When your depreciation is to start, whether you have a set end period, so Sun can calculate in between those two periods, and it does tell you when the last time depreciation was run. Just as before we get too far into that, with recording information in Sun, as far as assets concerns, the transaction amounts in the fixed asset register are not a separate register, the same as some other systems use. Everything in the Sun asset register is picked up from the general ledger, as it is with debtors and creditors, and it's done by a series of markers and the asset codes. So when we first buy an asset, and you'll see here, we've brought an asset from Carco for $50,000, and we've put it into a work in progress, a holding account, because at this stage we don't know what the asset code is, and we don't have all the details. Once we have created the asset record, we can then go and transfer that money out of the holding account and into the balance sheet. But when we do the entry to the balance sheet, that's when we put the marker, and I'll talk about these markers in a minute, and the asset code. So that tells Sun to look at that transaction. That's an initial value asset. What trips some people up is they sometimes put the marker and code against both sides because it's an asset transaction. All that does is giving you a net value of 0. So I kind of work under the rule of thumb that all transactions to the balance sheet fixed asset accounts must have a marker and an asset code. And I even normally have a template journal. If I'm doing journal uploads through Q&A, I have a little formula set down the side that says if the account code that appears in this column is within the range of my fixed asset balance sheet codes, then the journal will give me a warning that I need an asset code and marker. So that's just a little trick I use to make sure I get things around the right way. So we've journaled some data in, and we've journaled an amount in. One thing that I will add with Sun 6.4 with the cloud is, of course, we do have access to IDM, which is the Infor document management system, which means we can attach other information such as pictures or documents to a particular record. And we can do this with purchase invoices or sales invoices or general ledger transaction lines or assets. So we can attach either a picture or a document to that, or we can attach several things to the record. There's a picture of my car that I've just brought. We could have the invoice that we brought it from, so we've got all the details there. I think we've got another picture on this one. Or you could even have something like the instruction manual as an attachment to that record. Okay, so we've kind of been through the fixed asset record. The second tab here is the analysis codes. Now we can have 10 analysis codes, and they don't need to be created separately as they used to be in Sun 4, where you had to have if you were using location analysis, you had to have a set for your T codes and then a set for your F codes for fixed assets. You can use the same dimension and sets of codes across multiple areas. And again, I've said you can have 10 different analysis, classifications, locations, maintenance. I've got one client who uses barcodes. So they have a parent and child barcode, where they have assets that are in multiple parts, so that they can match the part to the parent asset. And if the part changes, then they just need to change the parent asset code for that particular piece. We also have the asset class, which is a separate analysis field for grouping assets together. Most commonly, it's for grouping assets to match your balance sheet accounts. That's the easy way, so you can get reports to match your asset register to your balance sheet, to just make sure that you've got all the transactions with the right markers on. Value one is the depreciation, and this is where we've journaled our amounts in. So these amounts showing we cannot touch, we cannot change. They are picked up from all of these transactions, where it was, that have the asset marker and the asset code, and that's where Sun gets that information from. We have a range of depreciation methods that you can select from. We can even do some customizing with those, a little bit more complicated. You can pick your range, and as I said, you can either have a depreciation percentage, or back on the general tab, you can have a start and end period. So Sun will calculate divide the depreciation across those start and finish dates. Now, just to go back to these markers, if you're not used to using the markers, this is how they work. There's only three markers. There's an I, a V, and a D for depreciation, quite obviously. If you're using an I marker, I have an asset here that's brought in period 1/2020 for $60,000. I say it's going to have a 5-year lifespan, so my depreciation rate is 20%. What Sun does is that looks at that information and goes, well, that's 5 years. I'm running it 12 periods or 12 months a year. So that's 60 periods I will divide the depreciation up into. So this is a straight line depreciation, of course. So every month I will charge $1,000, and it will start that charge from period 1, 2020. And the last one, because it's 5 years, will be in 206012. And that's the last time we'll get depreciation. On our fixed asset record, we can dictate a final value, so it will only depreciate down and leave a final value if we want. Where we get into fun, some people get into trouble, is later on, a year down the track, we buy another piece to this asset, and a spoiler for the car, another piece for a machine. This does not, and we put it on at 2023-001, this does not extend the life of the asset. The asset will still end up depreciating to zero at 2026 period 12. It will not make it go further. The differences are, if you put an I marker in there, it will say, okay, the depreciation was supposed to start back in 2022. So so it's still my 60 periods. And so that'll be $100 per depreciation, but I've missed the first 12 months worth. And I've got this month to go. So my first depreciation run will be $1,300 to catch up, and then $100 from then on up until the end. If I use the V marker, what this tells Sun to do is to take the depreciation as starting from there, but that's still not 5 years worth, because it's just an addition to this value. So Sun calculates this as only having 48 periods left to go, and so it will depreciate that 6,000 at 125 per month. So that's how the I and V mark and how the depreciation calculates. It does not extend the life of the asset. For that, you need to either add an additional asset just for this part, or dispose of the asset and bring it back on. So that's your asset record. We do have some other tabs here for other values. These are for if you are running a multi-currency system and you need to do your asset reporting in different currencies for reporting purposes. This is where you use those. If you want to do something like have a taxation ledger or even a forecast system, then you just create another budget. So you, as we have B budgets for our budgets or C for commitments, we can have a D ledger for taxation assets. We load the asset on exactly the same and we do the journal to put the amount in, but the depreciation rate might be different. We can also create another ledger, so an E, F, G, H, I, got to K at the moment, where you can load your assets on and actually run your depreciation completely for next year. So it acts as a forecast for your depreciation charges. So we can have multiple budgets, so you can have multiple reporting systems for your fixed assets. And I'm just going to quickly touch on the other bits. We are only a 10-minute session, so it's just to just let you know what's there. The asset posting presets, 90% of this is to lock in what analysis codes are used for the depreciation in the P&L. So your P&L expense goes by that. And I think anyone who uses the fixed asset register knows that you need to set this up, your assets depreciate. But what you can do is you can split this, so you can have two lines. So in the case where you had a motor vehicle that was used 70% by finance and 30% was a pool vehicle, you could actually change this depreciation factor to 0.7, and that got charged to the finance department, and then you'd create another line for 0.3 that was charged to the vehicle maintenance department. Just an option there, not an often used one, but it is there. I'll change it. Yes, please. Let me picture off. And the last one is the asset notes. This is one that is, you can attach a note to an asset, and in fact, you can attach as many notes as you like. And all it is, it's exactly what it says. It's notes. It's for serial numbers, descriptions, makes, models, types, colors, whatever you want. There's a section you can use if there's a maintenance frequency. You can record purchase details like who you purchased it from, if it was one of your suppliers, if it was purchased in a different currency, when the asset was commissioned, if you've been buying some machinery and parts. If you want to record insurance details, when you dispose of the asset, who you dispose it to, what you sold it for, any finance arrangements, and then you've got a whole section of spare fields that you can use for what you want. And so you can record a lot of information. And as I said, you can record more than one asset note to go along with your asset. And this is the other thing that does trip up a few young players, is if you have multiple notes that attach to a record. You may have a record that is the computer as a whole, and that's what's getting depreciated, but you want to have some separate serial numbers and details for the CPU, for the monitor, for the printer, for the mouse, for the keyboard, whatever. So you might have multiple records, multiple asset notes attached to this asset. When you run a Q&A report, Q&A looks at it and says, oh, well, here's the asset A and it has 6 notes, so I better bring out 6 lines. So it will bring out 6 lines for that asset, including if you've asked for net book values or depreciation or cost values, it will bring out 6 lines of it. And it's kind of really only doing what it's told, but that can get confusing in your reporting. So what I tend to do is, if you know for sure that you are never going to have more than one note attached to an asset, leave your asset code blank. Put your details in. Q&A will pick up your one asset, your one line. If you think you might be needing more than one note, then for every asset, create a note, whether you put anything in it or not. So I tend to create an asset note 0001 for every asset, and then when I do my reporting, I make my selection. I want all of my assets, but only those with asset note 1 attached. So that way I know I'm getting all of my assets and I'm only going to get one line. But as I said, that's only if you think you might be using multiple notes for your assets. So it's something to think about along the way. It is of course changeable along the way. Everything's uploadable through Q&A, even all of your general asset details. All of this is uploadable via Q&A, and Q&A can report out easily. And it can report out by here, and then you can also do a ledger report that reports by your asset codes, which is how you manage to reconcile your fixed asset register to your balance sheet. Because even though they're looking at the same thing, you do need to make sure you've got the markers in the right place in the right account. So that's why we tend to do some little reconciliation reports from ledger to fixed asset register. And that's kind of about it. As I said, there are a few more advanced tools and things we can do with asset registers. Of course, you've got your depreciation run, which is very straightforward. If I could spell depreciation, depreciation calculation, which is simply you pick the asset range you want, or you can pick by asset class, by range of codes, by any of your analysis dimensions, and it just runs and posts your depreciation for you. The only bit to watch out for is this posting period. If you have this set to historic and you have assets that have been put on as a backdated start date, Sun will backdate the historic depreciation. So if you're in period 6 and you brought an asset on that wants the depreciation to start for period 1, it will backdate 6 months worth into each period. If you have this set as single, it will post all of that 6 months initial period into the current period. So just watch out that 90% of cases you'll want that as single, because you won't want to be back posting into your P&L unclosed periods. So just watch out. So you have your historic and single posting there. It's the same kind of deal with disposals. Asset disposal. The asset disposal, you mark the asset record that the asset is ready for disposal. You run the disposal process. It will post the original cost and accumulated depreciation to date out of your balance sheet into a nominated profit and loss disposal account. It can't automatically post the sale details at the same time, because at the point you're disposing of the asset, it doesn't know that Sun doesn't know what that is, so it leaves you to do that yourself. And the other option is that you will get when it runs is you can make it clear your asset record, completely delete the actual record itself. Some people like them left on, sitting there with a nil book value and a disposed marker. Some people like them taken off. And it entirely is up to you how your business runs. So I'm going to close this off now. And of course, if you're watching this and you do have any questions or queries about fixed assets, please give us a call. And that's about it. So this is me signing off. Thank you very much. Cheers.